Alright guys, this is my first furniture flip video, if you don't count the metal stand that I did a couple months ago. But I wasn't going to film this because I haven't flipped furniture in a while and I didn't want to put pressure on myself to film while I was figuring out how to do this stuff again. But I decided to film anyway, I just couldn't hold back. So hang tight and let's see how this guy turns out. So I picked this up at my local thrift store. It was $20, which I thought was not a bad deal considering this is like a solid wood piece. It's pretty beat up, but that excited me because then it has so much more potential to look so much better in the end. You know, there's chunks of the wood veneer knocked off and just scratches all over, but that just gives this great potential to look good when it's done. First thing we needed to do was clean it, and as I pulled drawers out I saw these little kitty footprints. I thought that was cute, and we wiped down and washed everything with a little bit of soapy water, patched the holes. The knobs that came on this dresser were not original. Whatever was on it originally had used 2 holes, and these knobs only used 1, and they just left the other hole empty. So I knew you needed to patch 1 hole. The holes that were in the middle were not center, so I was patching all of those. And then I was leaving the side ones open to use the poles because I thought my son was okay with them. And how I patched them is I used little skewers and broke them off the width of the thickness of the drawer face and shoved them in there and then patched them over with wood putty to fill the holes. And I didn't know this, but when we were washing the things, apparently water spilled on the plastic and caused my wood to warp on the bottom of the drawers. I was so bummed when I realized this. So I did the best I could to glue everything back together. It was a lot of little parts, so I used painter's tape to tape it together, hoping that that would hold. And it's a bummer, but it's a good thing we're keeping this, and it's the back of the drawers. Nobody's gonna see it, but it set me back an hour or 2 of extra work. This part was the worst, and you can see here it glued together good enough, so I was pleased with everything going back together, at least functionally. It's not as pretty as it was before, but it was salvaged, so whew, lesson learned. Check for standing water when you wash your drawers and let your kids help. This piece I ended up having to cut this extra lip off because it was interfering with the drawer sliding in and out. The drawer pieces were really dry wood and kind of rough, so I went ahead and did a 180 grit sanding over all of the drawers, the inside of the drawer, the outside of the drawer, all of it, to just get the roughness off of it. Everything that I'm painting, I just went over with a 180 grit sandpaper to scuff it up and get it ready for painting. For the top of the dresser, I did a 180 sanding to get the stain out, and then a 220 sanding to get it more smooth and get the last little nicks out. And I'm really pleased with how the top sanded down, and then I did just a damp cloth to wipe it off and kind of see what it would look like stained, and it was looking sharp at this point. The stain I'm using is called Golden Pecan, and I actually thought it would be a really light colored stain, more of a yellow than a red that it's turning out to be, which I liked this color when it was wet, so I was pleased that it was going darker, but I was also surprised at the same time. I think I put 1 coat of stain on, covered the whole thing, and just wiped off the excess. Because I have these patched spots on the dresser front, drawer fronts, I really wanted to make sure that there was a good base before I painted it so there wouldn't be bleed through. I just didn't know what would happen. So I wanted to prime it. I thought black primer, or at least a tinted primer, would be best. I had white primer, but I had this can of black matte paint with primer in it. So I was like, I'll just use that up and that should work fine, and it actually did. And I saw this trick to bump your dresser drawers up close to each other so that when you're spraying, you're not overspraying into the inside of the drawers, and then it's, you know, just all kind of contained, and it worked out great. I ran out of paint, so I didn't get to fully prime the sides of the dresser, so it looked like I just graffitied my project. I thought it was funny, so I took a picture. In order to make this as cost efficient as possible, I tried to find as close to black as possible thing of paint off the mist tint rack at the hardware store, and I got this paint and the little lid swatch made it look like it was kind of a gray black, and I thought that's close enough. But as you can see, as this goes on, this is not black. This is like a gray blue. And after I got one coat on all of the drawers and the dresser base, my son was like, "Mom, I don't like it. That's not black." And I thought, you're right. It's not. And, you know, it was a $2.50 loss. That's fine. So we went back to the hardware store. There were some other things I needed to pick up anyway. And I let him pick out a black so that it could be the color he wanted, and he was much happier about that. After we finished the first coat of blue, my son decided he did not want any of the knobs put back on, but he wanted these handles that we had. So I had to go through and patch all of the rest of the holes, which at least we were still going to paint again, so it wasn't too big of a deal, but I had to patch all those holes. And one thing I learned in this project is when you sand down patches like this, you gotta sand it down to the bare minimum, because I left little bumps. I thought it felt smooth in my hand, but I could see bumps, and then once it was done being painted, I can still see the bumps there. So I realized I should have sanded that down to it was just a little bit circle hole that was filled, and that's it showing. On the top where I stained, I did have two edges that I patched, and it did not stain at all, even though the wood filler says it would stain. So I got out my paint markers because I don't have wood stain filler marker things, and I tried to be artistic and come up with layers of colors of orange and red and browns to try to mimic the design of wood with the limited resources I had to try to fill in these patches. And while I would not call this a professional job, I think that with what I had to work with, it turned out fine. It's in the back. It's not going to be seen anyway, so it's not a big deal, but at least it disguised this patch a little better than doing nothing. This is my first time trying a wipe-on poly. I've sealed 2 other tables, and it's a little bit of work to get that stuff nice and clear, polyacrylic, polyurethane, whatever I use. So I was interested in using more of a satin finish wipe-on top coat, and it went on very easily. I was very pleased with this. Every layer I did this on the stained wood on top and on all of the painted areas. I wiped on one layer. After it sat for, I think I gave it almost a half a day because the weather was almost in the 90s and humid, and I might have pushed it and maybe it needed to go further, but I did a light sanding with a 220 grit sandpaper between layers. I did 2 coats on the paint. That might have been excessive as it already kind of had a finish to it. And then I did 3 layers on the top, and I don't know, I question if I should have gone a 4th layer. It doesn't seem to be super thick, but all in all, I feel like it turned out just fine. Here's my little patch spot after the wipe on poly. I think it blends good enough. So once everything was dry enough, I needed to drill the holes and attach the hardware. Now, at just 1 day of drying, this is still pretty tacky, so I had to be very careful. Ideally, I should have probably waited 3 days before doing this to really let it set up. But I went ahead and I was just trying to be careful. And once I found the center from the height of the drawer front, I have 3-inch hardware that I was putting on, so I needed to find the center for the 3 inches and mark that off, and then went ahead and drilled the holes and attached the hardware very carefully, trying not to scuff up the front. This is my sweet kitty Milo, and he likes to visit me during projects. I have a picture of him as a kitten when I was painting my kitchen cupboard, so this was just a throwback to see him come in on this project. one of the drawer slides had come completely loose in the back. The hole where the screw was like a whole slit where the thing must have slid back and forth so much that it just ripped a big strip open. So I patched the whole thing with wood filler and just drilled a little itty bitty bit of a hole, and then was able to screw it back down, and it held fine. You see my nice fancy square. I couldn't find my square, so I used a cardboard box, and the drawer fit. It was fine. Because this wood was so dry and rough and I had sanded the drawers, I decided to use a feed and wax conditioner to just kind of bring life back to the wood. I've watched other videos do this, and I thought I want to give it a try. I've heard other people talking about how good the stuff smells. This one, maybe it's just a cheaper brand. It didn't have much of a smell. It didn't smell bad, but it didn't have much of a smell. But I rubbed it on the inside of the dresser, on every drawer. I did it on the outsides. I was cautioned about putting it on the inside of the drawer, that it might get kind of an oil residue on the clothing. So I just, once I was done rubbing all of the outsides of the drawers, I just took the rag that I had been using and kind of did a light rubbing on the insides of the drawers, so it kind of got some coating without being a lot, that it would hopefully not come off on clothing later. And I think this was really needed. I think the whole thing just looked more vibrant and seemed like just better quality wood after doing this. As I wrap this project up, let's take a moment before the final reveal to look back at what we started with. This dresser definitely needed some TLC, and I think we have given it what it's needed to let it be used for years to come. And if you like videos like this, if you liked this video, please hit the thumbs up button. And I would love for you to subscribe to my channel to have you see more of my content in the future or watch past videos. And thank you so much for watching, and please enjoy this final reveal.
Entertainment.